This was the cruelest joke the universe had ever told. He'd spent 15 years behind a lens, building a reputation for portraits that felt, that reached through the frame and grabbed you by the throat. His work had appeared in Time, in the New Yorker, on gallery walls in Manhattan and London and Sao Paulo. He had a gift, people always said, for seeing what others missed. The old woman's hands, the child's shadow, the way grief sat in the corner of a smiling mouth. And now the thing that saw was dying. Retinitis pigmentosa, a degenerative disease of the retina, progressive, irreversible. His peripheral vision had gone first quietly, years ago. He'd blamed tiredness, screen time, age. Then the central vision began to narrow slowly, then faster. Dr. Osi had delivered the timeline 3 months ago with the careful, practiced gentleness of a person who delivers such news often. 6 to 8 weeks, perhaps 10 if he was lucky. Ethan had not told anyone except his sister Maya, who lived in Chicago and called him every other day, and tried not to cry on the phone and mostly failed. He had not told his assistant, Jonas. He had not told his gallery contact, Ruth. He had not told the woman he was, in some unspoken, undefined way, falling in love with. He had not told Lena. Chapter 2. Jonas S. Reyes was 24 and painfully enthusiastic in the way that only the young and uncrushed can be. He arrived at the studio at 9 a.m. with 2 coffees, a croissant, and a folder of emails he'd printed out because he knew Ethan preferred paper. "Okay, so Ruth called again," Jonas said, setting everything down on the cluttered work table. "The gallery wants to know if you're still on for the October show. Tell her yes. Also," Jonas hesitated. "There's this." He slid a folded letter across the table. Ethan opened it. It was from the Prism Foundation, a nonprofit that worked with the visually impaired community. They were producing a photography exhibition, but with a twist. The photos would be taken by people in the process of losing their sight. The project was called The Last View. "We are looking for photographers who are themselves experiencing vision loss," the letter read. "We believe that the act of choosing what to photograph, when you know each session may be among your last, creates images of extraordinary honesty and power." Ethan read it twice. Then he folded it and set it down. "Where did this come from?" he asked. "Dr. Osi's office forwarded it." Jonas cleared his throat. I didn't know that you..." "It's fine." Ethan looked at his assistant. The kid's face was doing everything it was trying not to do. "Yes, I have a degenerative eye condition. It's progressing. I should have told you." "Ethan, don't," he said it gently. "I need you to not make it a thing right now. Can you do that?" Jonas nodded. His jaw was tight. He picked up his coffee and took a long sip and stared at the wall of contact sheets behind Ethan's desk. "Do you want to do it?" he finally asked. "The project?" Ethan looked at the letter again. "What would you photograph if you knew it was the last thing you'd ever see?" "Yes," he said, "I think I do." Lena. He met her on a Wednesday at the corner of Atlantic and 4th, where he was photographing the light on the old brick building at 4:15 p.m., a specific light from a specific angle that he'd been documenting for years as it changed with the seasons. She was standing nearby with a canvas bag full of library books, waiting for the light to change, and she looked at him, looking up at the building the way you look at someone who is doing something that makes no sense but that you find, for some reason, beautiful. "What are you looking at?" she asked. He lowered the camera. "The light, the way it hits that cornice. In about 2 minutes it's going to turn completely gold." She looked up at the cornice. "I've walked past this building 100 times. I know, everyone does. That's the thing about light, it's always doing something extraordinary and almost nobody's watching." She watched, and he was right. At 4:17 p.m., the late afternoon sun found the curve of the old stone cornice and the whole thing blazed like the edge of something holy. "Oh," she said softly. "Yeah," he said. Her name was Lena Park. She was a children's book illustrator, which meant she spent most of her days making the invisible visible, drawing the feelings between the words on the page, the colors of imaginary places, the faces of creatures that only existed in the gap between a child's imagination and sleep. She had dark, attentive eyes, a habit of tilting her head when she was thinking, and a laugh that arrived suddenly and then stayed, like a houseguest who forgot to leave. They got coffee, then dinner. Then they stood outside her apartment building on Dean Street for 40 minutes, talking about things you don't usually talk about the first time you meet someone, whether colors had sounds, whether buildings had personalities, whether it was possible to love a city and grieve it at the same time. I think I love this city most when it's doing something I've never noticed before, she said, like it's keeping secrets from me all along. He thought about the cornice, about the Tuesday morning light on his floor, about the lipstick stain on the mug. Yes, he said, exactly that. He walked home at midnight and lay in bed and looked at the ceiling. He found the constellation he'd named her and looked at it for a long time. Tell her, something in him said. Not yet, he answered. Act 2, Learning to See, Chapter 4. The project begins. Last view. Project had 6 participants, Ethan and 5 others, all at different stages of vision loss, all photographers to varying degrees of skill and experience. There was Raymond, 67, a retired civil engineer from the Bronx who'd taken up photography after his wife died and now moved through the world with a slow, deliberate intensity, photographing fire escapes and street corners, with the gravity of a man who'd learned not to waste time. There was Priya, 29, a photojournalism student from Queens whose vision loss had accelerated unexpectedly in the past year, and who met every obstacle with a jaw-clenched determination that made Ethan both admire and worry about her. There was George, 51, a high school art teacher from Staten Island who brought his students into everything, who saw the project as a lesson about impermanence that no curriculum could contain. There was Maria, 44, a Dominican-American nurse from Washington Heights, who said she'd never considered herself an artist until she started going blind and realized she'd been composing images in her head her whole life. And there was Henry, 19, a kid from Crown Heights who'd been born with low vision and was now losing what little remained, and who photographed exclusively on his phone and produced images of startling, raw beauty. They met once a week in a community center in Greenpoint, guided by the project's coordinator, a warm, precise woman named Dr. Asha Bloom, who asked them each session to bring 3 photographs and 1 question. The question mattered as much as the images. The photographs tell us what you see, Dr. Bloom explained at the first session. The question tells us how you see. Both are part of the work. Ethan's question at the first session: is beauty something that exists or something we give to the world? Raymond's response, which Ethan never forgot: ask me that again in 5 weeks and I'll have a better answer. Right now all I can tell you is that I went back to photograph my wife's grave last week and the light on the headstone was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. So either beauty exists everywhere or I'm putting it everywhere. I'm not sure it matters which. Chapter 5. What he photographed. He kept a notebook, paper, not digital, of everything he photographed during this period and why. Not the technical notes he'd kept his whole career. Aperture, shutter speed, the patient cataloging of conditions, but something more urgent, more stripped down. March 3, the water tower on Bergen Street, just before sunrise. I don't know why I've never photographed this before. I've passed it 1,000 times. It looked this morning like something out of a dream. The wood going dark at the joints, the tank itself silver gray against a sky that couldn't decide if it was pink or purple. I stood there for an hour. I think I was crying at some point. Hard to say. March 7, Jonas's hands while he was sorting transparencies. He doesn't know I took it. He has his father's hands, wide palms, blunt fingers, and the way the light from the light table came up through the transparencies made them look like the hands in a Renaissance painting. There's a callus on his right index finger from years of scrolling. I love this kid. March 11, Lena laughing at something I said, I don't even remember what. She turned away and I had the camera in my hand, always have the camera now, always, and I took it. She doesn't know. She had her head tilted back and her eyes closed, and she looked like someone who had never in her life been unhappy, which I know isn't true, which somehow made it more beautiful. March 15, the mug. Just the mug, lipstick stain and chip and all. I don't think anyone else will understand this photograph, but I need it to exist. Chapter 6. The conversation that didn't happen 3 weeks into the project he almost told Lena. They were at her apartment, which was warm and lit like a story. Plants on every ledge, illustrations pinned to every wall, the permanent smell of coffee and turpentine. She was working at her drawing table, and he was sitting on her couch, supposedly reading, actually watching her. The way she tilted her head, the way she bit the end of her pen when she was thinking, the way her hands moved, tentative, then certain, then tentative again. Tell her, said the voice. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She looked up, always. If he stopped, tried again. If something was going to change, about you, something big, would you want to know in advance, or would you rather it just happen? She considered this carefully, the way she considered everything. "I think I'd want to know, even if knowing was hard. Because then I could, I don't know, say things I needed to say, see things I needed to see." She paused. "Why?" "Just thinking," he said. She looked at him for a moment with those dark, attentive eyes, and he had the sensation, not for the first time, that she already knew, that she was waiting for him to catch up. "Ethan," she said gently, "you know you can tell me things." "I know," he said. "I'm getting there." She nodded. She went back to drawing, and he went back to watching, memorizing, quietly photographing in his mind the way the lamp caught the line of her cheek, the way her hair fell forward when she tilted her head, the way everything in that room seemed warm and alive and real. "Get there faster," the voice said. Chapter 7, Raymond. It was Raymond who said the thing that changed everything. Week 4 of the project. They were looking at each other's work, spread across the big table in the community center. Images ranging from Raymond's severe architectural compositions to Henry's intimate, blurred phone photographs that looked like paintings made from memory. Raymond had brought 3 images: a fire escape, a bodega cat asleep in a sunbeam, and a portrait of himself in a mirror, out of focus, deliberately, so that he appeared as a smear of color and light rather than a face. "That last one," Dr. Bloom said. "Tell us about that." Raymond was quiet for a moment. "My whole life," he said, "I've been trying to be seen clearly, to be understood. That's what I wanted from people, from my wife, from my kids, from God, whoever. Just see me right, understand who I am." He looked at the blurred photograph of himself. "Then I started losing my sight, and I realized I've spent 67 years trying to be seen clearly, and I don't even see myself clearly. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's human." He tapped the photograph. "This is more true than any sharp portrait I've ever taken of myself. Because I'm always a little out of focus. I'm always still becoming." Ethan sat with that for a long time after the session ended. "I'm always still becoming." He went home and took out his notebook and wrote, "What am I becoming?" Then, underneath it, "What does she deserve to know?" Act 3, The Last Views, Chapter 8. He tells her it was a Saturday evening in late March, 5 weeks into the project. They were walking across the Manhattan Bridge on foot, the city laid out around them in lights and distance, the river below moving black and silver. He had his camera. He always had his camera. He stopped in the middle of the bridge. Lena stopped with him. "Look at that," she said, because he was looking at the skyline the way he always did, with that full, hungry attention that she'd come to recognize as the thing she loved most about him. "I need to tell you something," he said, without looking away from the skyline. "Okay," she said, not alarmed, "just ready." He told her all of it, the diagnosis, the timeline, the 6 to 8 weeks, now down to 4 or 5 at most, the project, the reason he always had his camera, the mug on his nightstand, the reason he'd stopped washing it. She was quiet for a long time when he finished. The wind came off the river and moved her hair, and she didn't push it back. "How long have you known?" she finally asked. 3 months. "And you didn't tell me?" "No." Another silence. He looked at her now, fully, directly, the way he photographed things he was afraid of losing. "I was afraid," he said. "I didn't want you to." He stopped. "I didn't want this to be the story of us. I wanted it to be something else first." "What story did you want?" "The normal one, where 2 people just fall into each other, and everything is simple." She made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a cry. "That's not the story, though." "No," he said, "it's not." She took his hand. He looked down at their joined hands, and he thought, "I will photograph this exact thing, the city behind us and the river below, and her hand in mine, and the way the light is falling right now, from the south, golden and low." He raised his camera with his other hand, and he took the picture. "I'm going to be here," she said, "whatever this becomes. You don't have to. I know I don't have to." She squeezed his hand. "That's why I'm saying it." Chapter 9, April. He had perhaps 3 weeks left of usable sight, and he used them ferociously. He woke before dawn every morning and went out with his camera, and he looked at every corner of the city he'd lived in for 15 years. He photographed the light on the Queensboro Bridge at 5:40 a.m. He photographed the pigeons on the St. George Ferry. He photographed an argument between 2 men in Carroll Gardens that turned, inexplicably, into an embrace. He photographed children. He photographed old men. He photographed rain on windows and flowers in buckets outside bodegas and the specific amber of a traffic light at night and the geometric shadows that fire escapes threw across walls in the afternoon. He photographed Lena, sleeping, laughing, drawing, eating soup, reading on the couch with her knees drawn up, looking out his window at the water tower he'd finally learned to love. He photographed her hands and her eyes and the back of her neck and the exact way she tilted her head. He photographed Jonas, who had taken to arriving at the studio an hour early every day and never mentioned why. He photographed Maya, who flew in from Chicago for a weekend and held it together beautifully until she didn't. And then they both sat on his kitchen floor and cried. And he photographed the kitchen light through his tears because even then, especially then, everything was worth seeing. He photographed himself twice, both times deliberately out of focus. He's still becoming. Chapter 10. The final session. Last view. Group met for the final time on a Thursday evening in April. Each participant had assembled their 12 best images from the project. They spread them across the table in a long, unbroken line, 72 photographs from 6 people, each one a document of a disappearing world. Raymond had photographed his neighborhood, his hands, his wife's grave, the shadow of a tree in the park where they used to walk. Priya had photographed her parents' faces, her own reflection in various windows across the city, a single red umbrella, and a note her younger brother had written her that said, "You see things nobody else sees, even now, especially now." George had photographed his students, just their eyes, nothing else, and the images were extraordinary, each pair of eyes a universe entire. Maria had photographed the hospital where she worked, the light in an empty corridor at 3 a.m., a patient's hand on a white sheet, a cup of coffee going cold on a nursing station desk, a window with rain on it, and in the reflection, herself. Henry had photographed the city from below, always looking up, always from the perspective of someone who has learned to find what others overlook, and his images were luminous, strange, and deeply free. And Ethan had photographed all of it, all of what he'd described in those late-night notebook entries, the water tower, Jonas's hands, the mug, the bridge, Lena, always Lena, in every quality of light he could find her in. Dr. Bloom stood at the end of the table and looked at all 72 images for a long time. "I want each of you to choose one," she said finally. "One image, the one you'd keep, if you could only keep one." They took their time. Ethan stood in front of his 12 images, and he looked at each one with the measured, careful sight he still had. Already diminished, already narrowing at the edges like a vignette he couldn't control. He looked at the water tower, at Jonas's hands, at the bridge, at Maya crying in the kitchen. He chose the one of Lena at her drawing table, head tilted, pen to her lips, eyes down, the lamp making a warm gold halo of the space around her. She didn't know he'd taken it. She looked entirely herself. "Why that one?" Dr. Bloom asked. Ethan thought about what Raymond had said. "I'm always still becoming." "Because," he said, "that's the one where I was looking at something I wanted to see, not something I was afraid of losing. There's a difference." He paused. "I think I spent most of this project learning that difference." Raymond made a sound of agreement from across the table. Henry said, quietly, "That's the whole thing, isn't it? That's all of it." Chapter 11. The last morning it came, as these things do without ceremony. He woke one morning in late April and the world had changed. Not gone, not yet, but transformed. The ceiling was there, but the water stains were vague. The constellations dissolved. The light through the blinds was still light, but it had lost its edges. The mug on the nightstand was a shape, a warmth of color, a suggestion of itself. He lay still for a long time. Then he got up and went to the window and looked out at the street below. He could see movement, people, cars, the general pulse of a morning in Brooklyn, but the specifics were gone. No faces, no individual leaves on the tree outside, no lipstick on any mug anywhere. He picked up his camera anyway. He stood at the window. He looked out at the blurred, luminous world, and he took the picture. It would be, he knew, in the way you know these things when you finally stop lying to yourself, one of the last photographs he would ever take with his own eyes in the aperture. And what it captured was this: a street in Brooklyn in morning light, soft focus and glowing, full of movement and life. Everything in it present and real and impossible to hold. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever made. Lena was there when he set the camera down. She'd stayed the night, and she was in the kitchen making coffee, and she came in and looked at him standing at the window, and she didn't say anything for a moment. "Today?" she asked. "Getting close," he said. She came and stood beside him. She looked out the window at the street below, the sharp, clear world that she could still see in full, and then she described it to him. Not over-explaining, not performing, just, "There's a man walking a dog, a yellow dog, and the dog keeps stopping to smell something on the corner. There's a woman in a red coat looking at her phone. The tree outside has new leaves, very small, very green, the kind you only get in April." He listened. He looked at the luminous blur of it. "Thank you," he said. "I'm going to keep doing that," she said, "for as long as you want." "I know," he said. "That's the thing. That's the whole thing." 6 months later, the exhibition. Last View. Show opened in October at a gallery in Chelsea. 72 photographs from 6 people, each one labeled only with the photographer's first name, the date, and a single sentence. The question they'd brought to the final session, repurposed now as a title, a frame, an opening. Ethan's 12 photographs were arranged in a line along the longest wall. His chosen image, Lena at her drawing table, lamplight, head tilted, pen to her lips, hung at the center. Beside it, a small card. Ethan, April 14th. Is beauty something that exists or something we give to the world? On the night of the opening, the gallery was full. Ethan stood before his own wall of photographs and he could not see them. Not clearly, not anymore. Lena stood beside him and quietly, steadily described each one. The water tower going silver at dawn. Jonas's hands in the light table glow. Maya on the kitchen floor, the bridge, the mug. People moved around them. Some stopped to look, some stopped to cry. Some took out their phones and photographed the photographs, carrying a new layer of vision out into the night. Raymond stood for a long time in front of his own blurred self-portrait. Then he smiled. Priya sold every image she'd made. She'd already enrolled in a graduate program in sound-based storytelling. Finding the next sense, she told anyone who asked, "Before I have to." George brought 12 of his students, who walked through the gallery with the focused, reverent energy of people encountering something true. Maria spent an hour in front of Henry's photographs and said nothing, and that was its own kind of eloquence. Henry stood in the corner, phone in hand, photographing the people who were photographing the photographs. At the end of the night, when the crowd had thinned, Ethan and Lena sat on a bench in the back of the gallery. He couldn't see the photographs on the walls anymore, just shapes, warm light, the geography of a room. But he could hear the city outside, and he could feel her shoulder against his, and he could smell the faint turpentine and coffee that she always carried with her like a signature. "What do you see?" he asked her. She looked around the gallery. She looked at the photographs, all 72 of them, the accumulated vision of 6 people who had looked harder than most people ever do at the world that was leaving them. "Everything," she said. "All of it. I don't think I've ever really looked at anything this hard before." "That's the thing," he said. "That's what all this," he gestured, a wide sweep of the arm. "That's what all of it was for." She took his hand. The city was doing what it always did, being gorgeous and indifferent and alive, full of light that landed on things nobody was watching. Inside, 6 people had made 72 reasons to watch. Somewhere in Brooklyn, a water tower was going silver in the dark. A mug sat on a nightstand, lipstick stained, unchipped now. Lena had found one that matched, had given it to him as a gift, had said, "You can have the original and something new at the same time." And the light in that apartment was exactly what it always was. Ordinary, extraordinary, unrepeatable. An alarm was set for 5 a.m. Ethan Cole would not see it ring, but he would hear the city waking up outside his window, and he would feel the particular quality of pre-dawn stillness, and he would reach out, instinctively, permanently, for the camera on his nightstand, and he would hold it. And that would be enough. That would be everything. The end. The Last View original story. Runtime equivalent, approx. 90 minutes. Genre, emotional drama, romance.